Welcome back to Life's Chillent. My name is Avital, and this week we have the double Parshas of Chukat and Balak. And Parshat Chukat and Parshat Balak are really action-packed Parshas that have a lot of different events going on, but most of them are sort of sad or tragic events. So some of these events that occur is we see the death of Miriam and of Aaron, who are the siblings of Moses. Moses is informed that he will not be allowed to enter the land of Israel with the Jewish people for sort of something that occurs during this Parsha, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's a plague that kills many of the Jewish people. The Jewish people have to go to war against a lot of nations who will not let the Jewish people pass through their land. And we see at the end of Parshat Balak, we see a lot of the Jewish people turning to idolatry. So a lot of difficult and heavy events. And what I wanted to focus on today is sort of connecting an event that happens during Parshat Chukat and one that happens at the very end of Balak. And that would be Moses being told he's not allowed to enter the land of Israel, and an event relating to idolatry that we see at the end of Balak. So I will get into those. Following Miriam's death, a lot of commentators believe that the Jewish people, as long as Miriam was alive, merited to have water. Wherever they went, that her merit blessed them to continue to have water. And that when she died, the water sort of dried up with her and the Jewish people were left without water. And once again, they rise up to Moses and they say, hey, why did you take us out of Egypt? It would have been better to die in Egypt than to die here in the desert, thirsty, blah, 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 blah. And this makes Moses and Aaron very upset. And God comes to Moses and Aaron, and he tells them, take the staff and gather together the assembly, you and Aaron your brother, and speak to the rock before their eyes, that it shall give its waters. And then it continues by telling us that Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation before the rock and said to them, listen now, O rebels, shall we bring forth water from you from this rock? Then Moses raised his arm and struck the rock with his staff twice. Abundant water came forth. And the assembly and their animals drank. Hashem said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe in me to sanctify me to the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you will not bring this congregation to the land that I have given them. So God is saying to them that the people were angry, right? They didn't have water. God told Moses and Aaron to speak to the rock and water would flow, and Moses and Aaron hit the rock instead. And God says that they failed to sanctify his name. So in earlier Parshas, we learned about the idea of sanctifying God, which means that in public, when somebody knows that we're Jewish, or maybe even if they don't know we're Jewish, but because we are Jewish people and we represent God and we represent the Jewish people, we have to act in a certain way that brings glory and honor to God's name rather than desecrating it. We have to act in a way that people who look at us will say, wow, that person is amazing and they're Jewish, so it's a good sort of light onto the Jewish people. It's like it puts a good aura around Judaism and the Jewish people. And Moses and Aaron, they were leaders, and they were publicly tasked with speaking to this rock in order to honor God, and they failed to do so. And so now jumping to, we could say that they sort of failed to it's called a Kiddush Hashem. They failed to sanctify God's name. And then Parshat Balak, it ends with this story, and it tells us, Israel settled in the Shittim, and the people began to commit harlotry with the daughters of Moab. They invited the people to the feasts of their gods, and the people ate and prostituted themselves to their gods. So they became idolatrous. The people, basically, the men became flirtatious and became into relationships with the Moabite women. And the Moabite women, they were idolatrous. And because of their sort of influence on the men became idolatrous as well. And the Torah tells us that it went so far that a Jewish man came to the assembly in front of public, in front of everybody, in front of Moses, and in front of Aaron. And it says that came and brought a Midianite woman near to his brothers in sight of Moses and in sight of the entire assembly of the children of Israel, which basically means that he engaged in physical relations and sexual relations with her in public. And this was such a big desecration of God's name. This was them being A, just disrespectful, and B, sort of spitting on God's sort of moral code in front of public view. And the Torah tells us that Pinchas, who was Aaron's grandson, that he saw this, he saw what they were doing, and he took a spear and he pierced through both of them, killing them. And there had been this great plague amongst the Jewish people because of the idolatry, and it stopped when he killed them. And so it's a little bit extreme maybe to be relatable, the idea of Pinchas having to go to such an extreme to kill these two people for sort of their public desecration of God. But I think what we're seeing between these two stories is the importance of making God proud, in a sense, of doing things that bring honor to God. In the sense of Moses and Aaron, they sort of failed in their mission. They were holy people. They knew that when God said to speak to the rock, that they shouldn't hit the rock, and that it was going to elevate God's name and God's ability, that all they had to do was talk to this rock. They didn't even have to touch it, and water was going to flow. And then we see at the end of the Parsha that Pinchas, after seeing this sort of very graphic act in public, that he went ahead and killed them in order to sort of restore honor to God's name. And we are not necessarily always in front of so many people, but as Jewish people, we have sort of the obligation also to bring honor and to bring glory and to be people who, when other people look at them, they say, wow, look how good those people are. And it brings a lot of respect, and it brings a good reputation to Judaism, and they're like sort of by proxy to God. And so when we're in public and when we have the option, when someone knows we're Jewish or they might find out that we're Jewish, it's like an obligation to hold ourselves to a higher standard in order to show respect and in order to make a Kiddush Hashem. And so I think that's a very beautiful lesson we can learn from Parshat Balak and Parshat Chukat. And I wish you all a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom. And I look forward to speaking with you next time.